it done got started on.
نعم.
man.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Kayfa halakum?
Rahmatullah.
To you Muslim brothers and sisters, and for those who aren't Muslim, we say welcome to our show, which is the Night Shift Returns. And this is a topic that we felt that is a very uncomfortable topic, and it needs to be not only addressed but discussed, inshallah, in light of the Quran. You know, I'm going to be using evidence from Quran and Sunnah. Our brother Isa is going to also be tuning in and giving us some of the experiences of dealing with this particular topic at hand. And this is not a topic many people feel open to really discuss, and we will get into some of that. So today's talk really would pretty much be an introduction, because we can't cover all of the different facets of molestation only in one show. We don't have enough, you know, it's not going to be able to do. That's not even possible. I just want to make a disclaimer. First and foremost, we're not coming to you as experts, okay? We're not in any type of medical field whatsoever, so I don't want no one to think that we're speaking from a position of being experts. However, we will be using and utilizing some of the works of Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya on dealing with the psychological state of certain things such as molestation, and many things like that. Because in my experience, a lot of people in the medical field and even in the psychiatrists and so forth, they deal with a lot of research, analysis, behavior, pattern, but very seldom do you see them make cross-reference with the soulful realm or the spiritual realm.
No, they don't. They're not trained in that.
Yeah, so they really don't make the connection between. However, I like the fact that Ibn Qayyim, he brings a connection there that the spiritual realm as well as the heart plays a direct role, which is the essence of man, and we will get into that, inshallah.
And you know, like I said, like you said, like our brother Abu Zayd said, he said we're not giving you any medical advice here. We're only going to share. I mean, for me, I'm just going to share my personal experiences, and I'm going to share what I've learned through my journey, and what I've learned from others who on the same journey, who I've met, who dealt with the same thing, and what they told me about their experiences. That's all I can really share. And it may resonate with you. You may have been through some of the same things. You may have felt the same way, or may not. If it resonates with you, then it resonates with you. If you never felt that way, then it doesn't resonate with you, then that's okay. But like I said, we're not medical doctors. We're not telling you how you should feel, what you should feel. We're only giving you what we've been through and what we felt. That's it.
Tayyib, as far as molestation or being molested, it has been explained that any person who has been sexually assaulted, okay, or been abused in a sexual way, it can even be a person making advances towards someone, someone who's been harassed sexually. However, there are different forms of molestation, and it's not always molestation is just with children, even though child abuse, sexual child abuse is something that's very serious. But molestation can take place in multiple different facets. All right. Now we're going to try to address two people, because remember, there are two people or two parties involved when dealing with the issue of molestation. That is the molester himself, and that is the one who is the victim of molestation, okay, who has been traumatized, because it leaves certain residue, whether that be emotionally, whether that be psychological,
physically,
whether it be physical. You know, it leaves a bad residue.
It does.
You understand? And sometimes most people don't want to come to the forefront, as analytical data has suggested that most molestation or child abuse is not brought to justice because most of the victims do not even come forward.
Because of the shame of it and the regret of it.
So it brings about some of those past things, is like you said, shame, humiliation, resentment, anger,
over sexualized.
It makes a person more loose, promiscuous,
or gratification, which I'll try to explain a little later. Gratification.
So most of these things you can see around about, and it can happen with a family member. You know, it can happen with a direct parent. It can happen with someone who isn't a part of the family, but a friend of the family. And one of the things about trauma is the fact is it's not to be imprisoned by it. The main thing that we have to realize is that we should not allow the traumatic experiences that we have experienced in our life to imprison us, which would impede our progress moving forward as individuals. It shouldn't define you, but you should learn how to cope with it. You understand? Learn how to cope with it. I'm not saying forget it. I'm not saying erase it. I'm saying to cope with it. Understand? And this is very important because if we allow our traumatic experiences to put us in a deadlock,
that's what happens. It's hard to get out that prison. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. And sometimes we don't be just. Sometimes we don't be just. And we project what we have experienced onto other individuals that we come across or cross their pathways. That can be in relationships, whether it's romantically, whether it's
business.
Business,
you gotta,
whether it's friendly.
You gotta figure, it does all of that.
And sometimes the victim can feel as though every person or every male, if that was the subject of the one who brought about that victim, that crime or that abuse to them, that every other male is a pervert, or this is, you see how it is, see how they look at me, see how that can bring that mindset to project on everyone else.
Stop trusting people. You stop trusting people.
Exactly.
And if it's a man that it happened to at a young age, you stop trusting women and you devalue them. You devalue women. You may not think you're doing that, but that's where it comes from. And
a lot of this stuff results from that. So to me, I want to connect something which I want you people to really, and I have to really take this into consideration because me, myself, and I will get into that, Issa too, we both have been victims of molestation. As for me, I've been molested early as the age of 10.
It happened to me at 8.
I experienced it with my babysitter, what she have done to me. Being robbed of your innocence, not understanding what's going on, can be confusing. You understand? But the core thing of it boils down to what I see is about desire. How do we understand desire? One of the top enemies of man himself is his desire. And if you don't know how to control it and it become uncontrollable, what happens as a result of that is it leaves a lot of devastation in its wake. People who are bent on child pornography, sex trafficking, dealing with child molestation, dealing with any type of sexual abuse, they are victims of their desires. They have been overcome by it. Allah Jalla wa Ala has a verse in the Quran where he speaks about the people of Lut. Now, the people of Lut have many other issues, but one of the main issues Allah talks about is the sexual deviancy which they practice. Men on men. It was one of the core issues, men on men, women on women. But I want you to pay attention. Allah Jalla wa Ala, he used, by swearing by the Prophet ﷺ, he says, La amruka innahum lasakratuhum ya'mahum. Allah is mentioned by your life, they were wildly driven into their intoxication. Here Allah Jalla wa Ala refers to the act of this immoral and despicable act that they were practicing as being an intoxicant. And this is what I want you to understand. However, it's so potent that it clouds the judgment. It clouds the rationality.
It's like a drug.
That's what it comes. And so when it clouds that, all you can see is the object of your desire. You don't see a person. You understand? You don't see a person. You don't see a person. That person is not seen for who that person are. You see an object of your desire. And your desire have crippled you so much that you don't even care what you're doing to the person, the devastation that is left from it.
Yeah, well, you get tunnel vision. You get tunnel vision, and basically it's like the horse visors on the side of the horse. That's kind of what happens. And that stuff makes you selfish. When you caught up in your desires, at that moment, you become one of the most selfish people because it's all about what you want and what you desire. You know what I'm saying? So you don't even care about anybody else around you. You just need to get that fixed. It's no different than a dope addict.
And what happened is the word in Arabic is called al-hawa, from hawiya, Yahweh. Ibn al-Qayyim said linguistically, if you look in the Arabic language, it means to fall. Okay? It means to fall. But when you apply it in the technical sense, when a person is engaging in their hawa, then what that person is doing is actually falling down.
He's falling from his grace. He's falling from his grace.
Exactly. So that person is falling down.
He's falling from his grace.
So hawa is the inclination towards something. Ibn al-Qayyim explains to us that the creator have placed this inside the human being as a way of a test to see whether or not he's going to prefer that which is right and fight towards that desire. This is why when the Quran mentions hawa, it mentions mostly in a blameworthy sense. The hawa in and of itself is not blameworthy. Desire in and of itself is not blameworthy, something the creator gave us. It's the excessiveness or the extreme measures which a person goes into that will cause it to become on that border.
A lot of times, just to add to it before you read what Ibn Qayyim said,
yeah.
Just look at it like this, right? If you drink too much water, if you eat too many vegetables, you do anything, it can harm you, right? So the thing is not that Hawa in and of itself is bad. It's just that when things happen to you, like we're dealing with trauma here, if you get molested at a young age, just what we're talking about, maybe just for example, the chains that keep Hawa in check and keep you from going over the limit gets broken down at a young age. You understand what I'm saying? So at a young age, you can't concept what's desire and what's Hawa. It happens to you, but you can't concept it because you're not at the age to be able to put it in its proper place. And if somebody takes that from you at a young age, you grow up without even having the balance of it. So this is why you'll find a lot of people that's molested, a lot of women, especially, but guys too, where when that happens to them, they grow up over sexualized, and that whole concept of being in balance and controlling Hawa is going at a young age. So you never learn how to balance it out.
Well, one thing you want to take in consideration, when you're a kid, you're naturally curious, all right? As you start to grow and your mind start to become more aware of certain things, what happens is you start to explore. A lot of people, a lot of experts, they explain that it's kind of healthy that children actually explore at a certain level, which is out of curiosity. Not saying that it's something that is encouraged. And we as parents, when we see children playing with one another or, doing stuff that they shouldn't do, we naturally, we speak harsh on it. I know me, myself, we come down on them really hard and severe so they can stay away from it, deter from it. But naturally, the child is just being curious.
Yeah.
Okay. And exploring. It's not like a person who is actually who understand the ramification, like Issa was saying, or understand the true manifestation of what actually taking place. So this is something that's naturally happened. The child will be curious to start knowing what this does and what that does. A child first gets an erection as a
you do.
Being boys.
Yeah.
You wonder what's going on here, right? So these things pretty much happen. Now, it's different when you have someone who is conniving and aware of exactly what's taking place, and they take someone's youth or their innocence,
they take advantage of the situation,
and they prey on that person.
Yeah, take advantage of the situation.
Do you understand? That's a little bit more. It's definitely sickening. Trust, it's definitely sickening. But the person who's doing it is diseased. They have a disease. The person who's actually doing it has a disease. All right. Now the analytical data shows that not all, but in some of the cases you see where a lot of this molestation take place, you're going to witness that something down the line happened to the person who's doing it.
Yeah, for most cases.
For the perpetrator.
Yeah,
some type of abuse have took place which projects onto others. All right. This is what this case study actually.
And by talking to people, through my journey, most people that I've ever talked to about being molested, and like I talk to the girls, and they may be lesbians at 19, she's a lesbian. You talk to her, she got raped for the most cases, or she got molested over and over again by uncle, whoever. And a lot of times you'll see them hating men to the point where they end up being a lesbian. That's mostly what I've seen. And I had a conversation with an older brother maybe 2 or 3 days ago. He's a psychologist. And the brother Ahmed, old head, and he was breaking down his job when he's dealing with these young girls. He said almost 9 times out of 10, almost everyone he's talked to, except for very rare cases, all of them got raped or molested.
And the issue is, I want to address the victim, and maybe like I said, this is going to be a series. I can't just talk about this once. And I want to address the perpetrator, Now, the victim must realize whether you are male or female, because it happened to males as well, as we both were males, and as well as it happened to females. So the thing is, you have to realize that the person who is submerged and engulfed in their desire and controlled by it, they don't see you. They just see the object of their desire. And this is why it's important to, maintain that justice balance. It's hard. Trust me, it's very hard. If someone was doing it for a certain amount of years, say if you have been victimized and been traumatized and been abused or molested by a same family member, and it's on a hush hush and it happened for years, that grows into a monster. You confront your mother, or you confront your brother, or you confront your father, or so forth. Or it can be your father or your brother actually doing it. You know the ramifications psychologically that does? Do you know that what it actually does to an individual, knowing that the people that you trust the most, that's supposed to have your security there, is allowing certain things to actually happen?
That destroys your trust with anybody else outside of them who's less than them. And it stays with you until you deal with it.
And the thing about a child, the child projects inwardly before the child projects outwardly. So the child will make excuses for the perpetrator and believe that it's something that the child is either doing or have done, or the reason for such act.
You become judgmental to your own self.
Exactly. Until you become more aware, like, yo, that was really sick what he was doing, or that was sick what she was doing. But before then, the child is in that makeup world is doing that.
Or they get the Stockholm syndrome where they start to enjoy it and they never figure out. They get to the point where I've seen people fall in love with the one who raped them and molest them. And then when they finally snap out, that's even a whole other process to get out of. I've seen people actually be split, like they be kind of losing their mind. They don't know what to do.
So now my issue to you is that the core junction of this boils down to desire. So we need to start understanding what is desire, how to fight it, how to combat it. All right. So Ibn al-Qayyim has a book called The Dispraiseworthy of Al-Hawa. And he brings so many different ways to fight and combat desire. And one of the things that Ibn al-Qayyim actually explains, he says that the man has two things that needs to be used as a way of combative form towards desire, and that is deen and reasoning. Now, a lot of people might say, well, what deen has to do with it? Deen is, as I said, many experts, they do not cross-reference this, and they should, which is because we all consist of a soul, we all consist of a spirit. Whether you want to argue whether or not the soul exists or the spirit exists, that's neither here nor there. The deen part, as along with the reasoning and the rationalization, the deen brings about what we call the moral code. If the human being loses the moral code, then what is the distinguishing factor that separates the human being from the animal? What distinguishes the human being from the animal? We can't be purely animalistic and just behave off of desires.
No.
So the deen, as Ibn al-Qayyim said, is that moral code. Is going to give you what's right, what's wrong, what's the morality, what's the just part of the situation, what is destructive to yourself and to others. How do you weigh that? How do you do this? And the reasoning, the rationalization is what you need. So when a person is engulfed in their desires and it overcomes them, Ibn al-Qayyim explains to us that, rahimahullah, that what happens is a person becomes like an addict, where they're no longer getting the satisfaction or the pleasure of the desire itself, but they're trapped in the habit. So they've been doing it for so long, they can't break past the habit, but they're still not even getting the gratification that they once got when they actually.
Well, they're chasing the dragon. They're chasing the dragon.
Pretty much. And this happened.
They're chasing the dragon.
You already heard it. You have people who are sex addicts.
Yeah, they're chasing the dragon.
You have people who are sex addicts.
Yeah,
you have people who have no boundaries in terms of sex.
Yeah, no doubt. They do it up, and then they get bored with something. That's why they get into more weird stuff, because they're still trying to feed that addiction. You know what I mean?
So when you go inside of a man or a woman who doesn't know how to control their desire, that the desire actually leaves them, and now they see someone who is an easy prey, because it messed with them psychologically. They no longer thinking with reason.
No doubt.
This little girl, this little boy, it's not in their mind to say that this is a person, or this might be my family member, this might be my friend, this might be someone, a friend of someone. It doesn't matter.
Because somebody like them, that the person they are now, when they were a child, somebody like them did that to them. And they passed that poison off to them. They never got it cured. And now they passing that poison off to somebody else.
You have to understand desires, we all born with them. And desires, like we said, is not either good or bad unless it's excessive, you're doing it. So you have to use something to deter you from following them. Yeah. If I have a desire, for example, pops in my mind, I say, okay, here's an image of a female or this or that. And I am not held accountable for that image.
Yeah.
It comes to mind when I now allow that desire to seep in, and now I want to act off that desire.
Well, you got to separate nature from overdoing something. For example, like naturally, I mean, I'm a heterosexual male, so-called. I guess the terminology they use. But I like women, so it's not unnatural for me to be attracted to a woman. The problem is when you go and get these women and you go ahead, you lay with them, you have sex with them without the marriage contract. So when you get into all of that, that's where your nature now has went beyond itself. So, in a lot of cases, man, people, I remember when I told myself, when I finally realized that, when I looked at myself like, oh, I love myself, like I was telling you earlier, when I finally realized how much I love myself, it got easier not to disrespect myself. And a lot of times when you're molested and you go through that thing, you lose love for yourself because you feel like you did something wrong. You feel judgmental. You feel so messed up that you don't love yourself like you should. And I tell everybody, if you really want to, get away from a lot of stuff outside of the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you got to love yourself as well. And when you love yourself, you will not do things that hurt yourself. You won't disrespect yourself because you got too much love, because love for yourself creates respect for yourself.
Now, when the babysitter used to watch me, she would have me come in the room, and I really didn't understand what was going on, but she would place me on top of her. Now, me being young at that time, really not knowing, what's going on in here, but this would go on quite some time. Now, instead of me just telling my mom or, and letting them know like, yo, this is what's going on, this is what's happening, that wasn't the thoughts that were running through my mind at that time. You understand? I wasn't thinking that, I should just tell someone, with this girl who's babysitter that doing it. But as I'm now older and I'm able to like look at situations and look at my behavior as sexually and exploiting sexuality, I realize where a lot of my permissiveness have come from, and I realize a lot of that have come from what I have experienced. Being molested.
Yeah, you're right.
And I realized that it played a major role on how I viewed women. Yeah. It played a major role on how I viewed sex, the fulfillment of it, and how I act in terms of dealing with things. So it's important to notice that. But one thing I didn't notice that I knew that the perpetrator wasn't aware that she was so overcome with her desire that she didn't see the devastation that she was causing to the actual.
No, you was too young to understand that whole concept.
I didn't understand all that concept.
You was too young to understand that.
You understand? Concept. So that's why
she might not have understood it.
I don't believe she did.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't believe she did.
Straight up.
You know what I'm saying? Because sometimes it becomes certain acts where it become unforgivable. It become unforgettable. Some people have conceived at early ages. Some people have conceived from the molester. I mean, the perpetrator actually have them.
You carrying around that joint for the rest of your life. You carry around that issue for the rest of your life. I remember, like, we moved to Atlantic City. My mom was dealing with a guy, right? Moved to Atlantic City. And the dude used to beat my mom. I'm talking about beat my mom up to the point where she had buckets of blood in front of her. That type of stuff was going on. So we used to have to fight this, but me and my brother and my sister used to try to jump him. We was little kids, though. We couldn't really do nothing, but that's my mom. Pick up an ashtray, bust you across your skimmer. You know what I mean? Yeah. So he had a cousin used to come through. Girl, she used to come through. She's like 16. I'm like 8 at the time. So she come through, and one of the things she used to do, go there, give me oral sex or whatever, touch on me, get me to do stuff to her. I'm 8, like it's a girl. She got hair places and body, and I'm like, I gotta give you oral sex. I didn't even know what oral sex was. I couldn't even concept the reality. And so she did this for a while. And one of the things that came from that, right, the emotional trauma that came from that is that I used to get, whenever I got aroused, it would be a heat in my chest, and I would have to release it. So it was almost uncontrollable. I couldn't stop it. I was like, all right, look, it'll come, and I had to do something to get rid of it because it got to the point where it started hurting. I was like, I got to get rid of this. And that's what came from that. So I found through my life, I was always trying to get sex or get something. I don't care if it was just a hand job. I needed something to release that. And it wasn't like that until that happened to me. So I'm telling people from my experiences, yeah, this stuff has a physical, emotional effect on you, and you gotta face it down because it's going to be hard to stop. You know what I'm saying?
One of the things you got to think about is that once you do something long enough, if it's immoral or abnormal, it becomes normal.
Yep.
And you no longer actually see a victim in front of you.
No.
You just see the fact that, I want to fulfill it. And then if you can get the person, and you say how it happened. A lot of people always say mental illness. Mental illness stems from somewhere. Yeah, how does it happen? Yeah. So a lot of people say, it's mentally this, mentally that. Cause and effect. No, how did it happen? So individual, what happens is a person will now start to, long as they believe they can bring pleasure to the victim and get the victim to like what they are doing, and then it's okay.
Yep.
You see how I made you feel? You see how your first experience? You see this and that, and forgetting the fact that this is immorally wrong, forgetting the fact that you're taking someone innocent, forgetting the fact that you are devastating someone. This is the object of your desire. You're fulfilling it, and you're getting someone else to feel that pleasure. That's a sickness. But how did it happen? It started from somewhere. And the root problem is not understanding how to combat your desire. Your number one enemy. You have to understand how to fight it. The heart can be sick. This is what not the medical experts are not going to talk about. The psychologist is not going to talk about the state of your heart. They don't look at that. Your heart doesn't play a direct role in that into them.
Even though clearly now they have a study, even though clearly now they can look into your brain and your heart, and like they'll take people who are like depressed and people that got mental issues, they now can look into the heart, they look at the heart and they look at the brain, and they can see it looks different than the healthy heart and the healthy brain. They clearly see it, but they're not going to connect it to the spiritual realm. They're not going to connect it to that.
No.
But they see clearly the physical effects of being molested, depression, and trauma. It can literally, trauma has an effect on your brain.
No.
You know what I'm saying? And in your heart. They can clearly go in there and see the black spots. They can see with a heart not pumping like it should. They can see the brain having black spots on it, and it not, because it's not firing right. And they'll take somebody who hasn't been traumatized, and they see the heart and the mind looking different. They can clearly see that.
Well, that just shows you that whatever happened in your life, it has an effect.
Yeah.
And now they seeing the physical ramification of that effect. That's all. That's what that shows.
Yeah, that's what they show.
That whatever we go through in life is going to leave some type of residue. And we learned that from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ when he make it clear that whenever a person commits a sin, there's a black dot that appears on their heart. And it's the run. And that run actually appears on a person's heart and it leaves some certain type of stain. So it's nothing you can do except that there has, like you said, the cause and effect, that have some residue there. It's going to
have some effect on you.
But how do we treat it? How do we get the people who have been molested to step up? I'm not talking about just children, because you have to enter the world of a child and really to get that child comfortable enough to actually even enter that. So I'm not an expert to tell you, every child's going to come forth. You need to go to the police, or you need to go to those in authority that can help you out. Go to your parents, because sometimes a child can, run and tell someone, and it get blocked off, it get cut off. You understand?
Yeah.
And then that there shames the child even more because it's no help coming from that way, and it caused the child to project some type of hatred towards that particular person who stood by.
No,
it allow it to happen.
It does.
You understand? It's like it cuts off so much devastation. So some of the things that we have to really, really, really hone in on is it's good to have healthy conversation with your children. All right. You don't have to be so afraid and uncomfortable to have a conversation with your child. You don't have to have a degree
to have a conversation with your children.
Do you understand? And you don't have to be so mean and invasive or intruding, so to speak, so that your child will be uncomfortable enough to confide in you what they actually are experiencing. And one of the beautiful things about experience is one of the best teachers is because you were once a child before that child.
Yeah, no doubt.
You went through experience as well. So why wouldn't you be the one who want to conversate where your child at? You understand? Yes. And sexual molestation have caused a lot of mistrust.
Oh, I mean, listen, another thing that happens to you, the value system of yourself. Meaning, I'll give you an example just for my personal thing. As I got older, right, and you kind of like, you don't forget what happened to you, but you forget where that emotional trauma came from originally. You don't forget what happened to you, but you don't know how to place what you're going through to that. So being as I didn't know how to do that, I got older. I had children. I got married. And one of the things that was brought to my attention by a sister I was married to, the last sister I was married to, was I valued myself based on how good I was in the bed. I valued myself off what I could do for a woman sexually. And I never knew where that came from. I forgot where that came from. But when I traced it back, it came from that, because when you're overly sexualized at a young age, you think now that your value is based upon that, because that person showed you love and concern based upon sexual encounters.
Well, that was your first encounter towards it.
Yeah, exactly. So what you do is that what you do is you start basing your marriages on that. So you don't really give any emotional support to anybody. You don't try to get it. You like, listen, this is what I can do for you. I can make you have an orgasm. I can do this right. But that runs out, because if you mistreat a woman, she may love that from you, but now, she like, I love him. He can do that for me in the bed, but you're not giving anything emotional up, because that when you get molested, one of the things that happened to me personally, that the way I felt my emotions in caring for somebody was cut totally off. And all I think I had to give you was that sexual energy.
Now, one thing I want to explain is that just because people have degrees or have certain statuses or positions in life, it doesn't mean that they have not experienced some type of traumatic experience. It doesn't mean that they didn't they learned how to overcome their desires. You can have an individual who is an imam, quote unquote, a student of knowledge, that suffer from some of these diseases, that they cannot overcome their desires. And you find that when they are in situations or have been involved in situations, accusations has been led or made, or things have been done because they didn't have now to control their desires. I just want you to let you know, it doesn't matter what you know. You have to understand that. If you do not address these issues, if you do not come face to face with these issues, if you do not process these issues in the proper manner, which then allows you to then apply the remedy for these issues, then you're not going to get far. And you're going to find yourself having this vice with you that's going to be devastating to the people that you come into their lives, because you weren't brave enough. And I'm not saying that this as an attack, because sometimes you can be devastated to the point where as though it doesn't allow you to show bravery. And I understand that for those people who have been victimized so brutally.
And I've been there.
Whereas though they can't show that braveness. But one of the things that you need to know is that, hey, I need to address this issue. One therapist, he made a good point. He said that in families, we're taught that we sweep things under the rug, especially like the issue of molestation. People have been,
they sweep under the rug
like that. Normally, nobody want anyone to hear it. It becomes a hush-hush situation. So, nobody want it, because they don't want the family to feel shamed, humiliated. These things, the family thinking about the reputation and so forth, and not about the feelings of the person who has been victimized. So they hide it. But the therapist said, what that happens when you bury those issues like that, then what they do is they start to develop and they grow. And when they grow, as the child is growing, or as that person who experienced growing, they develop into monsters. And now that person don't even know how to overcome that monster.
No, they don't.
They don't even know how to fight it, because
they just embrace it at some point.
What happens? A person doesn't address the issue.
Become a rapist, you become all types of weird stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so that's how it goes.
So your local imam who leading the salat might have issues that he didn't address.
He might be a rapist. We've seen this. We've seen brothers who be imams.
But you have to think about it.
Sleep with their own daughters, all types of stuff.
We see this even with the diocese. Them placing celibacy on themselves, and then the archdiocese, and then dealing with and touching children. We see this. Allah Jalla prohibits this in the Quran, for putting celibacy on yourself in the first place. Allah said they placed upon themselves something they weren't able to bear. And because of that, it caused them to have to release, because you have to release.
You got to release.
So then it caused them to, again, desires. This is the point I'm trying to get you to understand. It does not matter what position that you have. Stop being so trusting and say, just because the person is this or the person is that or the person is this. No, it have to have the proper understanding and appliance and application.
No, it does.
And that
it
is
does,
granted
it does,
from the
yeah.
success of Allah.
It
So
does.
when Allah give you that tawfiq and give that person the tawfiq to really check and balance their desires, that person is safe. That person is definitely have the success. A lot of people don't have that.
One of the things that I think really helped me, like I said, when I'm personally dealing with this issue, I had to accept the apology that I never got.
Okay.
So
that's a good way of looking at it.
I had to accept the apology that I never got. And I had to stop looking for the apology from the people. So I just accepted their apology without ever getting it. So once I did that, and you kind of understand that they had an issue and they did this to me because something happened to them, it's easy to forgive them, overlook what they did.
It allows you to become more compassionate when you actually have insight into the situation.
Yeah, and you got to understand that you're destroying yourself by holding on to it. They don't move on with their life. So once I realized that, and then you grow a certain concern for yourself first, and then it went into loving yourself. And once that happened, it was like, well, and you look at your life, you was like, okay, then you start judging things based on, is this loving myself or not loving myself? And once I did
these
that,
things are important because when I looked at, my situation, one of the things that helped me overcome even that, because I'm still dealing and struggling with it.
Yeah.
Because I'm still tracing some of those traits that have resulted from the residue.
You got to find
the origin. So once you start looking at that, for me, I was
Yep.
able to say, you know what, as you just mentioned, the perpetrator themselves have been overcome and didn't know the steps to fight it.
No, subhanAllah, that's the truth.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I didn't need an apology from her per se.
Yeah.
Me, I didn't need that apology from her. But one thing I realized, I'm not going to allow that traumatic experience to imprison me.
You can't.
Because I'm going to look at it as, okay, I can use it as a hurdle to move over. And I think sometimes a lot of us, we don't know how to get past that. So what we do is we go outside of ourselves to administer a problem that can be dealt with.
Well, you're looking for somebody else to get you over the hump than yourself. And a lot of times the power is with you. You know what I'm saying? So, like one of the scariest things I ever had to do, and I've been in uprisings, war zones in Egypt, grew up in North Philly, been in shootouts, been stabbed, beat with a baseball bat. Stuff that literally is frightening, right? But the most frightening thing I've ever had to do was to face myself. Meaning literally, because the personality that's just created by trauma becomes you. But then it's another you that's right along with that didn't get tore up by the trauma. So it's two of you battling in there, maybe 3 or 4. I don't know. I'm saying that at the end of the day, you know you. So when you're fighting yourself, it knows how to move out your way. It knows how to block a jab. It knows how to move its feet with you. Because everywhere you go and move, it's going to move with you. So, but if you don't go in there and win that fight, it's going to be a problem your whole life. You got to go in there and get control of those monsters and those personality that was created through the traumatic issues that happened in your life. And once you lasso them up with that Wonder Woman lasso, and you get that lasso of truth, I call her, she had the lasso of truth, get you to tell the truth. You got to tell the truth to yourself. You got to look at yourself. First of all, things that you didn't have no control that happened to you, stop blaming yourself for. Stop judging yourself.
Well, that's important. Because one thing, again, I always tell people, and I learned this as well from Islam, is that when you look at your problems, you should always divide your problems into 2 categories. Problems which you had control over, which were either caused, usually the case, by your own hands and your own decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And problems which you did not have no control over, which usually the case is via a test or from the perpetration of someone else's aggression or whatever the case, transgression towards you.
It had nothing to do with you.
Now you have to realize, if you can process this and you can get to this stage of dividing your problems into this, you will be able to do what? You will be able to now take a lot of pressure that you have, weight that you have weighed yourself down with, and put things in its proper perspective. Because normally the ultimate outcome, those things which you do not have from your problems control over, is in the hands of God. That's how I look at it.
Yeah.
All right. That gives me an understanding to say, you know what, I can deal with this a little bit easily now, because now I know that, hey, I wasn't the culprit or the cause of this situation. I can't control the situation. I can't, the best way I can deal with it, to delegate it, is to now entrust my fear to Allah and to keep moving forward.
Well, one of the things the sister said here that's very important, that we make it somebody else's crime. The sister Tiana, we literally, if you don't do what the brother just said, those things that you had no control over, And once you hold on to them things, you will make it somebody else's crime. You will start to take those things and put it on your relationship, put it on your children, put it on your spouse, put it on your girlfriend. You will make them the victim and the criminal, even though you may not say that to outly to yourself. But being as though you can't take that to the person who did it, and you can't, and you're mad at yourself, and you blame yourself, you gotta take that energy and put it somewhere.
Important. That's why it's important. I was going to bring this verse earlier, but now that is a perfect time to bring it. That's why it's important to analyze what Allah actually says. A lot of people, alhamdulillah, they we all, sometimes, not all of us, but a lot of us profess Islam, but we don't even realize what the Quran is actually saying. At the end of the day, if you're not even going to apply it and really look at it and say, what is it actually saying? All right. Because one, to claim you know yourself better than the creator is absurd to me, because he's the one who created you. That's like looking at your son or looking at your daughter and they sitting there telling you about them. And you like, well, I'm the one who brought you into existence or so forth. No, you have to really take a look at this. So Allah Jalla wa Ala, he tells us in the Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kunu qawwamina bil qisti shuhada. All right, ala bil qist. And one version, which is sort of Nisa, and the other one is in Surah Ma'idah. The one I'm quoting is in Surah Ma'idah, the 5th chapter of the Quran. Allah says, "O you who believe, stand out for justice." Qawwamina. Okay, shuhada, as witness. Stand out as witness for justice. But look what he says here, and this goes right along with the sister was saying and what you were just saying.
Yeah.
He said, وَلَا يَجْرِمَنَّكُمْ شَنَآنُ عَلَى قَوْمٍ. Pay attention to this. Allah, ta'adilu. Do not let the transgression of others, the animosity which you have towards others, allow you to what? Curve off, to deviate, to move away from being just. You understand? So if you're in a situation where you've been victimized and you've been traumatized, and that person isn't the direct culprit of that situation, justice demand that you do not project that onto them.
Yeah.
Justice demand. It's not easy. But if you don't know how to make the distinguishing factor, this is why, again, one of the strongest agents that the man have, the essence of man, is going to be dealing with two things: deen and reasoning. Most people today are not moving rational.
Well, I mean, firstly, you got to do is begin to even implement the ayah. Who you got to be just with first? You.
Exactly.
So if you're not being just with yourself, that just is not going to anybody else. One thing is 3 words I always say.
Yeah.
Logic, practical, and pragmatic.
Right.
And if you live your life practically, logically, and pragmatically, meaning your emotions don't carry you everywhere. When I look at a situation, I look at it like this. Okay, what's practical about this situation? What's the logic of it? And I got to be pragmatic with dealing with it. Even if I got to give something up to, and quote unquote, lose, right? Like people say. But if it's logical and practical and pragmatic, and it's going to keep the situation where it should be, and you're going to get the most out of it, then you got to be practical, logical, and pragmatic. And I also say people who move with their emotion, they remind me of a mammal. Because mammals, bears and lions and tigers, all they do is growl. And all they think about their stomach. And if you want to move on your emotions and you don't get control of them, you're a mammal.
Well, the point of that is
you're on a mammal.
The point of that, if you look at what Ibn al-Qayyim is saying here, he's saying that these two things are the most strongest combative form: deen and reasoning. Your emotions need to be checked.
They do.
All of us have emotions, but the emotions, if they left unchecked, because you don't understand how to reason, right? And you don't have the deen to put a lock on it, then you ain't gonna know how to do it. Most people who suffer from a lot of mental illnesses, I'm gonna be honest with you, right? Because mental illnesses, I was explaining to the brother, especially depression, al-iltiab. Mental illnesses, as I was explaining to you earlier, is that it's an abyss. It's like a rabbit hole. And most people, they allow themselves to actually go into that rabbit hole and they can't get out. Like you was telling me, like the movie Get Out. Yeah. And they can't, and they can't allow themselves to get out. The creator have gave you lifelines to allow you to not fall deep into that abyss, to me. And I see those lifelines. And those lifelines is the attachment of the heart, which we don't want to talk about.
Yeah, you got to grab onto the lifelines, though.
That heart must connect itself to something. Yeah. If the heart isn't connected to the most strongest thing that's going to keep it above itself,
you're going to drown.
It's going to drown. Now, how does this play into the topic we're talking about ahead? Ibn al-Qayyim is telling us, okay, look, that person who's sick with sexual deviancy, and using the object and want to fulfill the object of desires is because he cannot control his hawa.
Yeah.
It's because of that thing. The reasoning went right outside the door. Yo, that's a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
You ain't supposed to be touching no 7-year-old. But he can't reason the fact that, that's a 7-year-old.
He can't reason.
He's not even looking at the fact, that's a 7-year-old child.
Yeah.
And it becomes so sick that you have people out there who are child molesters who want nothing but a child.
Yeah.
The perversion even go more crazy as they delve into the.
Some of these states, they actually debating now. I think in some parts of California, it's legal to go to places where little girls and little boys and stuff you can get. So I mean, they're saying now that it's actual part of the LGBT community. I guess they're gonna add one more letter to it. It's going to be pedophilia now. Is going to be part of that.
But you see the perversion. But you see the perversion. And the reality is because the reason is out the door. And morality is just shot. A person is not looking at anything but the fulfillment of their desires.
That's why I call them mammals, man.
And we as Muslims, when you learn Islam, you have to look at Islam as being therapy. Don't come into Islam and don't think that Islam doesn't have therapy for you. Islam has therapy. It's injustice
faith
when you look at
therapy. Every psychologist on the planet, whether they're religious or not, is going to tell you that faith is one of the things that's therapy. Outside of many other things, but faith is part of therapy.
You have to know how to apply it.
Yeah.
So we want us to get this, just an introduction. We would like to go into not just past experience, but we would like to go into some of the remedies that can help the perpetrator, inshallah ta'ala, and we would like to deal with some of the things that can help the victim who has been traumatized, because everybody's different. Some people have suffered this type of trauma for years.
Yeah.
Some people had their own father. You understand? Some people had people who were close to their families that actually done this. So it's kind of a little bit different when you're looking at this, because depending how close the perpetrator is, it messes with your psyche. You understand? That's like more psychological effect. Depending how close and how long the trauma was taken is different stages of that residue that might not be easy. So if a person come to the masjid and say, you know what, I'm overly sexualized, I have been a victim of molestation, and what do you advise me, brother Imam? Or what do you advise me, so-and-so? And the person say, well, you know, the ayat says this or the hadith says this. It's not just going to be easy.
Well, it's not black and white like that.
No, it's not. Because then you're gonna have to go into how long was this going on. You understand?
It's not black and white.
The different stages that the victim themselves have went through.
You know what's deep? You know, one thing I've learned, right? When I used to be overseas to do exorcisms, and one of the things that I got from Sheikh Muksin one time, we was talking about exorcism, and a girl came in there and she was demonic possessed, and they had to get the jinn out of her, right? And so they going through the rituals and stuff like that. So after that, we up in the library talking, me and Sheikh Muksin, may Allah preserve him, right? Mm-hmm. And Sheikh Muksin was like, I asked him a question about exorcism. This is my first time seeing it like that live and up close. He creeped me out, actually. So, so he told me, he said, when you're doing exorcisms, you gotta make sure the intent of what you're using the ayat for, or that is the intent is for the actual exorcism. So the point I'm trying to make is that when we're using some of these things from the deen, right, your intent of what you're trying to use it on has to be there. Meaning, if you're using it to deal with your molestation, to deal with some of your trauma, you should actually have that in mind when you're using some of these tools to apply to it, because intent is deep, and intent actually has an effect on when you're using something, right? And so my thing is that when you're going to, so a brother, like he said, Imam says, oh, go read this ayah, go read that. That man may not know how to apply that to what he's doing, because he may not know what the kind of intent he should have when he's reading these things to apply to, like self-ruqya. Stuff like that needs an intent behind it, because everything is based on intent of an action. So you should understand, okay, you're giving me this, but what's the intent? What's the application, the intent I should have when applying it? And that's one of the good things I learned from Sheikh Muksin, and learn from people who do exorcisms through my life and do other things, like even learning from different psychologists. When I'm talking to them, some are Muslim, some not, they all bring up this issue of intent. When you're doing something, when you're meditating, most people who meditate, they meditate on the thing that they want to deal with. and they only deal with that thing. They bring it to their mind, and that's what they meditate on. You know what I'm saying? It's not nothing magical. It's just intent is real, and you got to have it when you're doing this stuff.
Yeah. The reality is, like we said, we're dealing with a monster, and it's taboo, and it's something like the elephant in the room. A lot of people don't talk about it. A lot of people suffer from it, still are suffering from it, still are struggling with it. A lot of people who have professions, who have great jobs, great positions, people who teach, people who don't teach, are suffering from these things. You understand? And I just wanted to let you know, for someone to say, well, how can a person be quote unquote Muslim, reach the status that they reach and still have these problems or are subjected to these problems? That's not everyone.
It's a simple answer.
A simple answer for me is the ayat where Allah Jalla wa Ala says, Inna salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar. All right, I want you to pay attention because I want to finish the whole verse. This verse in and of itself tells us that the prayer prevents you from a lot of these things, right? So a person might say, I know a person who prays and does all of that, but he still does X, Y, and Z. Sheikh Muhammad Ibn, he brought a good point. He says, because the prayer in and of itself is not just a physical act. It's not mechanical. You're just moving from one way.
It's intent.
Okay? You have to go back again to the connection. It's a soulful and spiritual adventure that must take place there. All right? If you do it with that, understanding where a connection is to the creator and you feel some type of way of that connection, it's going to now cut you off from doing this and cut you off from doing that. That's how it works. But look what Allah says after that. He says, وَلَذِكْرُ اللَّهِ أَكْبَرُ. I want you to pay attention now. The strongest remedy in the Quran that you're going to see throughout the Quran for the diseases, because you have soulful sicknesses. And I believe molestation is from that soulful sickness. We can argue about it all day. Yes, but I believe it's from that. And that sickness is the strongest remedy. And it's been administered. Allah have administered on the battlefield. He administered when you're lying it down, when you're sitting, when you're walking, when you're standing, is to remember Allah. And I'm going to tell you one of the chief things of hypocrites who profess Islam is that they remember Allah few. They don't really remember him. You understand what I'm saying? They don't remember him. Allah Jalla wa Ala says, they don't remember him except but a few. It's really not, he's not really on their mind. That's the strong thing of having that remembrance. So my point of bringing this up is that a person can be in a position and still suffer from these things. Instead of us wiping it under the rug, we need to bring it to the forefront and address it. Does that mean you need to go on camera and talk about it? I'm not saying that. Does that mean you should get someone that you trust and qualified enough to speak to and address these issues to? Yes, possibly, maybe. Yeah. You understand? But you need to talk about it. Sweeping it under the rug, acting as if you're going to wipe it away, it's not going to do nothing. Because if you do that, what's going to normally happen is all of that stuff you bottled in have left some effects on you that you can't even trace to even deal with.
I had a guy, right? A guy was talking. He was expressing what he'd been through. And one of the things that happened to him was after he was molested for years. And he said he started to, me and him had a conversation about the heat in the chest. He went through the same thing. Right. And this drive to get it out, this overwhelming drive to get it out. And he said he started thinking about raping women and stuff like that. And he said the only way he was able to not do that, he used to go. He started as a young preteen. He started laying on his private part until he ejaculated. He would lay on his stomach. He would put his hand under there. He would lay there and put pressure on there until he ejaculated. That kept him from raping women. Look what happened to him psychologically. So he thought about it like, I can't control this, but I don't want to be a rapist neither. So he found a way to masturbate and get the energy out. I'm just saying that's real.
And I can strike from that. He used the what? What did he use? As Ibn Qayyim keeps saying.
He used reason.
He used reason.
He used his logic. He said, listen,
so morality
raping is worse than what I'm about to do right now.
So he used reason, which was a combative measure to help him stop. You understand?
But look what the trauma did to him. Look what it did into a psyche. That's proof that it has an effect.
Now imagine if you're running around with people who don't address these issues, who are afraid to discuss them, afraid to talk about them, afraid to deal with them, don't want to look at it. What happens is everyone pretty much becomes either a perpetrator towards you, because you have, like you said earlier, they run to lesbianism, right?
Yeah.
What happened is you have boys who run to homosexuality, right? So not only that, you have females or men who think that everyone looking at them, if there's a sick, evil agenda that they perverted or they want them. You understand?
Yeah.
You feel like the eyes that are looking at them.
Yeah.
And the issue is that you females that have been subjected to this, you must take one thing in consideration. It wasn't you. You were not the reason why it happened. You were born a female, which you had no choice over the matter. So you had become what they say, an object of someone else's desire. You're not the corporate. That doesn't stain your character because you have been preyed on. That doesn't define who you're going to be and who you are because you have been preyed on. That does not impede your progress or your moving forward or your relationships if you know how to address it and deal with it because you have been preyed on. You must understand this. And not every individual you're going to come across who might be the same sex of the person who have done something to you from your perpetrator is having those same problems. If we do not open up and communicate, we're not going to get ahead. And Islam encourages us to communicate because we have what we call shura, consultation. We have that in the Quran. Consultation, consulting is something that you must do. Communicate. A big key. Most relationships where people argue with one another, they're not arguing so they can understand one another. They ever try to overcome one another
or to reply. They
miscomprehend one another. You don't know where that person coming from. That person don't know where you coming from. And y'all can't reach nowhere because you don't even know how to express yourself. And when you try to express yourself, you're so frustrated, you're so angry because the words cannot come out and you don't know what you're saying. And so then it becomes a miscomprehension between you two. You're over here, that person's over there, and y'all never can get along. But y'all could have got along if you knew how to communicate. Yeah. If you knew the proper channels to understand one another, if you are willing to address those issues and not let them grow. That's how it is. So we ask Allah Jalla wa Ala to aid everyone who has been a victim to this horrendous sickness, which is a sickness, no doubt. And we ask Allah Jalla wa Ala to allow those individuals who have been the perpetrators to overcome their desires and to refrain and withhold their evil from projecting onto others and destroying lives and destroying families, as we've seen with the case of the R. Kelly case. You know, a lot of things have came out even in his past of things he was going through himself. You know what I mean? Exactly. Yeah. So you see a lot of this stuff actually trickles down. And I honestly believe, and a lot of experts also believe, I'm not saying it just to give credibility to what I'm saying, but they also believe that this stuff has to be addressed. If you don't address it, you're not going to be able to properly work it out.
Yeah, you got to get credit where credit is due. And for me, the last thing is that you got to learn to love yourself. And when you learn to love yourself and not blame yourself for things you couldn't control, you're going to start reacting in ways that show love for yourself. You're not going to do things that harm you because loving yourself, from that comes, you're going to start respecting yourself. And when you start to love and respect yourself, you're going to see that come out of your personality. You're going to see that come out in the way you react and act to things. I don't react the way I used to because I love myself too much for that. And I got too much respect for myself. So everything I say and do is based upon how much I love myself, how much I respect myself. And when people are doing a lot of crazy stuff, I'm telling you, start talking to them, they don't have a lot of respect for themselves and they don't love themselves that much. And they're going to act and behave in that way. And a lot of that stuff comes from the way they were raised and the trauma they went through. They look at themselves as I'm the bad guy and things happen to me because I'm bad. This is my fault. So you're going to live your life like that. Stop blaming yourself. Stop being over judgmental on things you couldn't control and start to love yourself. And you're going to be a mirror of how you feel inside.
Inshallah ta'ala, inshallah, we stay tuned. We do have the interview coming up with our brother Muhammad Rainier, which will be on the episode. Inshallah ta'ala, we're just trying to make sure we can lock down, get him in person to do something on that. So we have some of that coming up, inshallah. Also, this is just an introduction to this topic. This is not the end of this topic. We're going to have to delve deep in it. Like I said, I want to address some things that the perpetrator can actually do to help them curb this sickness. And I want to address some of the things that the victim can also do, the people that have been, the brunt of this, and some of the things that they can actually do, inshallah ta'ala, help them cope with it and not to be imprisoned by it. Whatever we said that was incorrect, definitely is from ourselves, in the shaitan. Whatever I said correct, it's from Allah Jalla wa Ala. Subhanakallahumma bihamdi, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. And I want to thank the audience for tuning in. Also, if you have not known, I'm putting it together. We did a course that helped us cope with anxiety, grief, and depression. It's known as a Grateful Course. Please, inshallah ta'ala, I'm going to get it up there so that your people can see it and can benefit. We use the works of Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyah. We deal with faith based tactics that's a little bit different than normally experts deal with it, to help you deal with these problems, inshallah, which is actually running rampant in our community, period. Whether Muslims or non-Muslims alike, we are suffering from dealing with these issues, mental illnesses, trauma, etc., etc. May Allah Jalla wa ala help us all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you again for tuning in.